Hi there, I'm Penny Lawrence and I'm the International Programmes Director for Oxfam based here in Oxford. And I want to tell you about a meeting that we had between the regional directors, the International Division Senior Management Team based here in Oxford, and the Campaigns and Policy Division Management Team also based here in Oxford. And we all got together as senior leaders as we do every 6 months. We got together here at St Catherine's College in Oxford just 2 weeks ago. And instead of just putting out a communique in written form, one of the sessions we had was on interactive media, and I'm demonstrating the use of interactive media by communicating through YouTube to you rather than just in the written form. And just want to take the opportunity to tell you a bit about the sorts of things we were discussing at the meeting. So it's a time for reflecting and learning together as senior programme leaders, and for also managing the business together. So it was broken down into sort of 3 chunks really. The first chunk of time was spent on how change happens within Oxfam. So we were reflecting on the national change strategy process and reflecting on climate change and looking at what we'd learned about how change happens within our organisation. We're very good at reflecting on how change happens out there in the real world, but actually, how much do we really understand about how change happens in Oxfam? And there's a lot of experience in the room to draw on, but we were sort of discussing how can we make change like chocolate, where people really want the change. Different people have different attitudes towards change, but how can we make it easier for everybody? And reflecting on our own role as change leaders. So we spent a day doing that, and each of us, I think, took away different reflections and different learning. In general, I think we were reflecting on the sort of culture that we have as an organisation. Emergent change works much better than directive change, but actually as leaders, we have to do both of those in different circumstances. If there's a humanitarian crisis and I sit down to consult with everybody over what we should do, it doesn't really work. And it's very important to match the context with the change method that you're using as a leader. We then went on to look at humanitarian issues and really tried to work on our sort of expectations across the organisation, trying to get on the same page on what expectations should be in rapid onset emergencies, and agree that we really should be assessing and responding. It's not a first assess then respond, and that preparation is everything. That a response doesn't start on day one. Our knowledge of the partners of the situation happens over a much longer period, and we must use that knowledge to make initial assessments that we can then adjust as we go along. We know enough about the context and many of the contexts in which we're working to be able to make fairly sound judgments, and we ought to be confident to do that really. So an assessment within the first 24 hours or so, and we ought to be aiming to respond within 3 days, which is when people can survive most disasters they've been subjected to for the first sort of 24 hours, 48 hours. It's 3 days when hunger begins to set in or exposure begins to really cause a lot of problems. So that was rapid onset. And then, do we really know enough about fragile states and about our response in slow onset emergencies and the humanitarian programme side? And we agreed there was a lot more that we need to do to develop our strategy and thinking. And that we were hoping that things were coming through in national change strategies, but maybe we need to cross-check that a bit more. We, as well as having humanitarian session, we had a number of external speakers. James Darcy came from the Humanitarian Policy Forum to really help us and get us stimulated at the beginning of the humanitarian session. We were lucky enough to be able to attract Paul Collier, who's written The Bottom Billion, which some of you may have read. Very interesting book for those of you, particularly in Africa, if you haven't. He was very stimulating and really challenging our thinking from how are you responding to the food crisis, and are you thinking about GM crops, to in fragile states where governments really struggle, what about some kind of intermediary body? And then Yankees Viz, who works for Unilever, who was telling us that Unilever are really interested in smallholder agriculture, which is quite new for a large commercial company to be interested, and where our agendas overlapped around agricultural scale-up and around sustainable agriculture, around social returns for smallholders, as well as economic returns for smallholders, then we came up with a proposal on how we can work on that together. So I hope that gives you some idea of what we were discussing over that week. Do read the communiqué, but I hope you enjoyed the YouTube bit too.